So the first thing I'll say is that when you said to make a body timeline, my first inclination was to think about weight stuff and think about sort of my timeline of weight loss and weight gain and disordered thinking and behaviors and sort of how that started. And that's already, realizing that is already kind of upsetting because it's like, well, I can't separate the idea of thinking about my body with thinking about my weight. So I included that obviously because it's a big deal, but I also tried to go back earlier and see sort of what other relationships there are that maybe led to that obsessive weight type thing. So until when I was a kid to an adolescent, I think that I had sort of normal adolescent girl self-consciousness, and I was an early bloomer and blah, 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 that kind of thing. I don't think that it was anything really out of the ordinary. It was sort of a dull semi-awareness of my body, and then I became more aware of it as I got older and periods and like when I lost my virginity and all of that. And I do remember a few times when I was young, especially when I was, when I was first starting to develop and everything, and I was like getting made fun of in school and stuff like that. And I was, like taller than other girls, and I had big boobs and stuff like that. So those are the kinds of things that I remember from earlier on. Like I would, if I had a stomach ache or something like that, this is a weird thing to remember, but I remember being in school and having a stomach ache, and if I had a stomach ache for whatever reason, I wouldn't tell anyone about it because I was worried about drawing attention to my stomach. If I was like, oh, my stomach hurts, that someone would then look at my stomach and think, oh, she's fat. And I realize now that even that was totally irrational all the way back then, And I don't really know where that came from. It was never something that my mom wasn't like really into weight loss or anything like that. My parents are both crazy cooks who, eat all the time and are really into food in what I think is a positive way. So, and then as I got older into adolescence and looking at this timeline, I realized that a lot of my patterns came along with the kinds of relationships that I had, romantic relationships. So when my first boyfriend, when I first started having sex when I was a teenager and everything, that was actually a very positive experience for me, which I know it isn't for some girls. But it was a very positive, loving kind of relationship, where I felt very comfortable with my body and more aware of it, and that it could bring me pleasure and that it could be a good thing. And, that I didn't have to be as self-conscious, and I would like not wear spaghetti straps and stuff like that when I was 12, 13, whatever. So I kind of got over that at that point, and it was a good couple years. And then I think, and again, I didn't really think about it that much. It was kind of whatever, and I was a teenager and I ate pizza, and it was like every once in a while I was like, oh, I'm not going to wear a skirt that short, but otherwise I didn't think about it very much. And then I think in my first year of college, I was like 19, and that was the first time that I ever became aware of my weight. And it was when I went to the doctor for a checkup, and I realized I weighed more than I had in the past. And my doctor didn't even say anything about it. It wasn't like, it was just something I noticed. And then this was at the same time that I started a relationship that was like ultimately really bad for me and unhealthy and kind of totally ruined my self-esteem for a long time afterwards. And I started getting really obsessive about working out, and I lost like a bunch of weight, and I just became super obsessive about it. And that was when I was like, that was between the ages of like 19 and 21 basically. And then I was like with a guy who cheated on me and like treated me really badly, and so it was kind of like I was using the obsessive weight thing and the disordered behaviors to, I don't know, I'm not going to try to psychoanalyze it, but it was happening at the same time as I was also really unhappy with this guy and like having my self-esteem crushed in other ways that were unrelated to what I looked like, but it was sort of, I was connecting those things. And then I was in the Peace Corps, and I didn't think about it as much. Then I broke up with the guy eventually, and I like swore off men for a long time. And then I didn't think about weight as much either during that time. And when I was in the Peace Corps, I yo-yoed a lot, and I used food as sort of an emotional I did the emotional eating thing a lot, but it didn't really matter so much because there were so many bigger issues going on, like being in the developing world and, trying to integrate into another culture and like living in a rural village. And, it was kind of like the food and the weight thing was secondary. And I was there for 2 years, so my weight went up and down a lot, but it was not a focal point for me because I actually had, real, more important issues to deal with. And then when I came back in the last the last year or 2 years being in New York, there's sort of been, it's kind of weird because it's like there are two paths for me going on at the same time, where for a while, I guess, I don't know if this happens to everyone who moves to New York or everyone who has a big life change or whatever, but I was really, really, really excited about being here at first and super happy and like having fun and partying all the time. And then I started to feel a lot of pressure about finding a job and sort of finding my place at school and with relationships and friends and, feeling lonely and confused about what I wanted to do. And then, like, the weight stuff came up again, and then it became a big issue for me. And then I was, like, being all crazy and obsessive and calorie counting and all that stuff. But then more recently, like, in the past, that was, sort of the first year, and then in the past, like, 6 months to a year, I have found my place, and I'm, like, in a good relationship, and I don't count calories or anything like that. I try to eat intuitively and exercise intuitively, and just, I'm trying to change the way that I look at myself and not be so critical and try to change a lot of the patterns that I had before. But at the same time, I'm, it's kind of hard because being more aware of it also, it's just a constant struggle all the time because I'm aware of it and I'm thinking about it, but that means that I'm thinking about it all the time, and I still think about it all the time, like constantly. In my head, I'm always like, okay, I had breakfast and lunch and a snack and this and that, and then it's like, well, I should only have this, and then I have to be like, no, don't think that way, and it's really annoying. Also, I started doing Bikram yoga. And I really, really like it because I like the way it makes me feel. It feels really great, and it makes me feel like much, much closer to my body because when I do things to my body that my body doesn't like, I become very aware of it when I do Bikram. Like if I drink alcohol or don't drink enough water, or I don't eat enough, or I eat something like super greasy, or if I don't sleep enough, I then feel that immediately, and it makes it kind of goes along with the intuitive eating thing because it helps me, communicate with my body really. But at the same time, I do, it's in front of a mirror, so you're staring at your own body all the time. So it's almost like a good arena for me to try to change the way I talk to myself and to not stare at myself and criticize it. But at the same time, if I don't choose to use it in that positive way, it can be really bad for me too. And I don't know if you guys have ever done Bikram yoga, but sometimes people like burst into tears and stuff. I know it's really, and I was always like, wow, what is wrong with that girl? Why is she bursting into tears? But sometimes it almost happens to me because I'm like, and that's not really what you're supposed to do in yoga. You're not supposed to be thinking that much. You're supposed to just be concentrating on doing the poses. But in any event, that's not very conclusive as to where I'm at right now because I'm struggling all the time, but I still feel like I'm doing better. And part of it is also, that I'm in a good relationship now and that I've found my place here and I've got strong relationships, a romantic relationship, professional relationships, friendships. And my yoga instructor the other day said something like that she was trying to give everybody a pep talk while we were looking at ourselves in the mirror and doing the poses and everything. And she was like, don't get upset at yourself. Don't get frustrated. If every single day is a completely new practice and it's totally different. You might not be able to do today what you did yesterday, and it's not a big deal. You can just sit down and try to look at yourself the way somebody who loves you would look at you. And I thought that was a really powerful, nice thing because I really thought about that because I was sitting down because I couldn't do the pose, and I was thinking about it a lot. And it was like, I don't ever do that. Like I can't think of any time that I ever do that. Like, I don't know if I have ever done that. And lately I have maybe once or twice. I could literally think of them exactly because it was so startling to actually do that and to sort of get a glimpse for a second and get out of that haze that normally surrounds you, like the haze of judgment. And so I'm hoping that I can get there eventually and have that happen more.